The first thing Daisy O'Hara saw when her eyes cracked open was white. Not heaven white, not peace white, hospital white. The kind that smelled like antiseptic and broken promises. Her throat burned. Machines beeped around her in a rhythm she didn't recognize. She tried to move her fingers. They responded barely, like they'd forgotten how to be hers. Panic crept up her spine, cold and unfamiliar. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this absolutely jaw-dropping story, I need to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, because I love seeing our community spread across the globe. And how are you doing today? I mean, really doing? If you haven't subscribed yet, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. You're going to want to follow this story all the way through. Trust me. This one's about betrayal, hidden fortunes, and a woman who discovers her worth when the man who abandoned her realizes what he's lost. Now let's jump in. Daisy blinked against the fluorescent glare. A nurse, young, startled, dropped the clipboard she'd been holding. Oh my God! Oh my God! You're awake! I need to— Hold on! Don't move! But Daisy wasn't trying to move. She was trying to remember. The memories came in fragments, headlights swinging wide across wet asphalt, the scream of tires, the sickening crunch of metal folding in on itself. Her hands had been on the wheel. She'd been driving home. From where? She couldn't remember. The harder she grasped for it, the faster it slipped away. Where? Her voice cracked, a stranger's rasp. Where is my husband? The nurse froze. Something flickered across her face. Pity, maybe? Or was it fear? Let me get the doctor. Just stay calm, okay? Calm. The word felt like a lie. Daisy's heart monitor started beeping faster. Her left hand throbbed, and when she looked down, she saw the thin white line where her wedding ring used to be. Tan skin, then a band of pale, like a ghost. My ring, she whispered. Where's my ring? The nurse didn't answer. She was already gone, footsteps echoing down the hallway in a frantic rhythm. Daisy stared at her hand. 6 months, they would tell her later. 6 months she'd been gone, locked inside her own body while the world kept spinning without her. 6 months since Tom Butler, her husband, her partner, the man who'd promised forever, had looked at her unconscious form in this very bed and made a choice. He'd chosen himself, but Daisy didn't know that yet. Not about the divorce papers he'd filed while she was unresponsive. Not about the socialite he'd been parading around town, the one with the trust fund and the country club connections. Not about the calls he'd ignored from a law firm in Boston, the ones that would have told him his comatose wife had just inherited $100 million from the grandfather she'd never known. All she knew was that her ring was gone. And when Dr. Patel finally came in, his expression grave and professionally sympathetic, when he sat down and explained that a lot has changed, and that her husband thought it was best for both of them, Daisy felt something inside her chest crack open. Not her heart. That was still beating, still fighting. Something deeper. The part of her that had believed in vows. In sickness and in health. For better or for worse. Tom had chosen worse, and he'd chosen to face it without her. He divorced me? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a scream. While I was— Dr. Patel nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Mrs. He caught himself. Miss O'Hara. I'm truly sorry. We tried to contact your family, but there was no one listed except your husband. And he made it clear he was moving forward with his life. Moving forward. Like she was an obstacle. Like 6 years of marriage could be erased with paperwork and signatures while she lay here, helpless, dreaming dreams she couldn't remember. The nurse returned with a cup of water, but Daisy couldn't drink. Her hands were shaking too badly. Everything was shaking. The room tilted, and she realized she was crying. Hot, angry tears that blurred the white ceiling into abstract shapes. She had nothing. No husband. No home, probably. No memory of why she'd been on that highway in the first place. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew yet, was that in a Boston high-rise, a team of lawyers had just gotten word that Daisy O'Hara was awake. And they were already booking flights. Because Daisy wasn't nothing. She was $100 million of something. And the man who'd abandoned her was about to learn exactly what he'd thrown away. The physical therapy room smelled like rubber mats and determination. Daisy gripped the parallel bars, her legs trembling beneath her weight, like a newborn foal learning to stand. 3 weeks had passed since she'd opened her eyes to a world that had moved on without her, and her body was still catching up. Sarah Corleone, the physical therapist with arms like steel cables and a smile that refused to quit, stood beside her with hands hovering, but not touching. "You're doing it, Daisy! 5 more steps. Show those muscles who's boss." Daisy wanted to laugh, but it came out as a grunt. Every step was a negotiation between her brain and her legs, a conversation in a language she'd forgotten how to speak fluently. She made it 3 more steps before her knee buckled. Sarah caught her instantly, strong and steady. "That's it. That's enough for today. You just walked farther than yesterday, and that's what counts." As Sarah helped her into the wheelchair, Daisy felt the familiar sting behind her eyes. She hated this. Hated the weakness, hated the dependence, hated that Tom had left her when she needed someone most. But more than that, she hated that she still wanted him to walk through that door and tell her it had all been a mistake. "You're quiet today," Sarah said, wheeling her toward the window that overlooked the parking lot. "Thinking about him again?" Daisy didn't answer. She didn't have to. Sarah had been her therapist since week 1, had seen her cry through every painful stretch and stumbling step. "You know what I think?" Sarah continued, parking the wheelchair and crouching down to meet Daisy's eyes. "I think you're not crying because you lost him. You're crying because you lost who you thought he was." "There's a difference." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Daisy's chest. She'd been a nurse before Tom, before she'd given up her career to support his real estate empire, to attend his networking dinners and smile for his business partners. She'd been good at nursing, had loved the purposeful exhaustion of 12-hour shifts, the way she could make a difference in someone's worst moment. Tom had promised she could go back to it once his business stabilized. That was 5 years ago. "I don't even know who I am without him," Daisy admitted, her voice small. "Then maybe it's time to find out," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. Before Daisy could respond, a knock echoed from the doorway. A woman stood there, mid-50s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daisy's old car. Beside her was a younger man, brown eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed, "Expensive lawyer." "Ms. O'Hara," the woman said, stepping inside. "My name is Rose Lonigan, and this is my associate, Arthur Brennan. We're from Rothman and Associates in Boston. We've been trying to reach you for quite some time." Daisy's stomach tightened. Lawyers. That meant bills. Hospital bills she couldn't pay. Debts Tom had probably left in her name. "I don't have any money," she said quickly. "Whatever he owes, I can't." Rose held up a hand, and something like a smile played at her lips. "Ms. O'Hara, we're not here about debts. We're here about your grandfather, Alistair Rowan." The name hit her like cold water. Alistair Rowan. She hadn't heard it in 20 years. not since her mother had cut ties with him over something Daisy had never fully understood. Family politics, old wounds. Her mother had died when Daisy was 19, taking those answers with her. I didn't know him, Daisy said. We never spoke. He never. Rose and Arthur exchanged a glance, and Arthur set the briefcase on the nearby table, clicking it open with precise movements. Mr. Rowan passed away 7 months ago, Rose said gently, but before he died, he made arrangements. You were his only living heir, Miss O'Hara. He left everything to you. Everything. The word hung in the air like smoke. I don't understand, Daisy whispered. Arthur pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and handed it to Rose. She held it, but didn't open it yet, her eyes fixed on Daisy with something that looked like compassion. Your grandfather built Rowan Steel Industries from nothing. When he sold it 15 years ago, he invested wisely. Very wisely. Rose paused, letting the moment breathe. Ms. O'Hara, you've inherited $100 million. Plus the estate in Connecticut, the properties in Boston and Portland, and various other assets. As of 3 weeks ago, when you woke up and we were finally able to confirm your identity, you became one of the wealthiest women in New England. The room spun. Sarah's hand tightened on Daisy's shoulder, anchoring her to reality. 100 million. The number was too big, too impossible. She'd been worrying about how to pay for her hospital stay, where she'd live when they discharged her, how she'd survive without Tom's income. And now, did my husband know? The question came out harder than she intended. Did Tom know about this? Arthur's expression darkened. We called him, repeatedly, Miss O'Hara. 17 times over 6 months. He never returned our calls. We sent certified letters to your home address. He refused them all. The anger that flashed through Daisy was white-hot and cleansing. Tom had ignored them, while she lay here unconscious, while he was filing divorce papers and planning his new life with his socialite girlfriend. A fortune had been waiting, and he'd been too proud, too certain there was nothing left to take from her, to even answer the phone. He doesn't know, Daisy said slowly, tasting the words. He divorced me, thinking I had nothing. Rose's smile was sharp as a blade. That's correct. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago, which means, legally, he has no claim to any of this. It's entirely yours. For the first time since waking up, Daisy felt something other than grief, or pain, or confusion. She felt the stirring of something dangerous and powerful. Not revenge. Exactly. Something better. Purpose. Tell me everything, she said, straightening in her wheelchair despite the ache in her spine. I want to know exactly what I have, what I can do. And she paused, meeting Rose's eyes with new steel in her own. And I want to know who else knows about this. Because if Tom found out, he'd come back. She knew him well enough to know that. And this time, when he showed up with his rehearsed apologies and his practiced charm, she'd be ready. Tom Butler saw the headline on his phone while sitting in morning traffic, and nearly rear-ended the Mercedes in front of him. Rowan Steel heiress emerges from coma. Daisy O'Hara inherits $100 million fortune. His blood turned to ice. The article was brief, posted by the Boston Business Journal just 20 minutes ago, complete with a photo of Daisy in her hospital bed. Looking fragile and beautiful and worth $100 million goddamn dollars. The phone slipped from his hand. No, this couldn't be real. He'd divorced her. The papers were final. His new fiancée, Victoria Hastings, had already started planning their wedding, had already introduced him to her father's investment contacts, had already promised to salvage his drowning real estate empire. And Daisy, sweet broken Daisy, who never had a dime to her name, was suddenly worth more than everyone he knew combined. His phone rang. Victoria. He didn't answer. He was too busy calculating, his mind racing through every conversation with his lawyers, every signed document. The divorce was final before she woke up, before the inheritance was public knowledge, which meant he had no legal claim, unless he could prove he hadn't known, that he'd made a mistake, that he still loved her. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd gotten rid of the wrong wife. Meanwhile, at Mercy General Hospital, Daisy was learning to walk again when the man appeared in her doorway. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that looked like it carried secrets, sharp jawline shadowed with stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore an expensive black coat and held a bouquet of white lilies, but his hands were shaking. Daisy O'Hara. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept in days. Sarah stepped protectively between them. Visiting hours don't start until... My name is Henry Vallone, he interrupted, his eyes never leaving Daisy's face. And I need to tell you something about your accident. Something the police got wrong. The air in the room changed. Daisy felt her pulse spike, the heart monitor betraying her sudden fear. Who are you? Henry took a step inside, and Sarah moved to call security, but Daisy held up a hand. Something in his face, in the desperate honesty there, made her pause. I'm the man who caused your accident, he said, and the words fell like stones. I'm the reason you were in a coma for 6 months, and I'm the man who's been trying to find the courage to tell you the truth ever since. Sarah had her hand on the call button, but Daisy's voice cut through. Wait! She stared at Henry, her mind racing back to the night, to the fragments she could remember. Headlights swinging wide. The impact from the side, not the front. Someone had hit her. You hit me? Her voice was barely a whisper. No, Henry said quickly, setting down the lilies on the windowsill with careful precision. I was following you. I hired investigators to track your husband because I needed to prove what he was planning. I knew he was going to divorce you, Daisy. I knew about Victoria Hastings, about his debts, about all of it. The room tilted. How could you possibly know that? Henry's jaw tightened. Because Tom Butler came to me 6 months before your accident. He wanted to buy one of my properties, a commercial building downtown, said it would save his company. I ran a background check, standard procedure, and found out he was drowning in debt. I also found out he was married to you. The way he said your name, like it meant something, sent a strange flutter through Daisy's chest. I don't understand. Why would you care about Tom's business problems? About me? Henry's eyes met hers, and she saw something raw there, something that looked like pain, because I knew you. Daisy. 10 years ago. You were a nursing student at Boston General. I was there visiting my sister after her surgery, and you stayed late with her when she was scared, when I couldn't be there. You probably don't remember, but you sat with Caroline through the night, held her hand, told her stories to keep her calm. Daisy searched her memory, but those years were a blur of faces and night shifts. I don't... You wouldn't, Henry said, his voice softer now. It was your job, but Caroline never forgot. She talked about you for months, the kind nurse who made her feel safe. And when she died 2 years later, when the cancer came back, I remembered your name, Daisy O'Hara. The woman who gave my sister comfort when I couldn't. The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah's hand had moved away from the call button, her expression shifting from protective to uncertain. So you... What? You've been watching me. Daisy's voice shook somewhere between fear and something else. Something she couldn't name. Not watching. Just aware. And when I saw Tom Butler was married to you, when I saw what he was planning to do, I couldn't stand by. I hired investigators to get proof of his affair, his financial crimes, evidence you could use in the divorce. But his voice cracked. But on the night I was going to tell you everything, my investigator was following you. Tom had just left Victoria's apartment, and we thought you might be going there, that you'd found out. But the tale went wrong. Another car got involved. Thought we were following them. Road rage. They swerved into your lane and you... He stopped, closing his eyes. You crashed, and it was my fault. If I hadn't been following you, if I'd just minded my own business, you'd be fine. You'd be walking. You'd still have your life. Daisy couldn't breathe. The machines around her beeped faster, her heart racing with too many emotions to name. This stranger had been trying to help her, had caused her accident, had carried this guilt for months. And the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and breakable, made her skin feel too tight. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Henry opened his eyes, and the storm in them was breaking. Because your husband just found out you're worth $100 million, and he's coming for you, Daisy. I saw him this morning, saw the panic in his face when the story broke. He's going to try to get you back, going to spin some story about love and mistakes and second chances. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to something fierce and protective. And I couldn't let him do that without you knowing the truth about everything. About him, about the accident, about me. The door burst open. Tom Butler stood there, perfectly dressed in his tailored suit, his face arranged in practiced remorse, holding roses. He froze when he saw Henry. Who the hell are you? Tom's voice was sharp, possessive. Henry turned, and Daisy saw his whole body go rigid. I'm the man who knows what you did. Every part of it. Tom's mask slipped for just a second, fear flashing across his face before the charm returned. Daisy, sweetheart, I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. I was scared. I was wrong, but now she's rich. Henry finished, his voice like cut glass, and suddenly you remember your vows. Daisy sat in her wheelchair between them, her former husband and the stranger who'd been carrying her memory for 10 years, and realized with perfect clarity that her life had just become a battlefield, and she had no idea who to trust. Security escorted Tom from the building, but not before he'd made a scene that had half the hospital staff whispering. Daisy watched from her window as he paced the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing wildly. Even from 5 floors up, she could read his body language. Desperation wrapped in designer clothes. Henry stood behind her wheelchair, silent. He'd stayed after Tom left. Hadn't tried to justify himself further, hadn't pushed, just waited. You should probably leave too, Daisy said, though her voice lacked conviction. Should I? His reflection in the window met hers. Do you want me to? That was the problem. She didn't. This man had just confessed to inadvertently destroying her life, and yet something about his presence felt safer than anything had in months. Maybe it was the honesty. Tom had built their entire marriage on carefully constructed images. Henry had walked in and dismantled himself in 5 minutes. I want answers, she said, turning the wheelchair to face him. You said you have proof about Tom, about what he did. Show me. Henry's expression shifted, something like relief crossing his features. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through files, then hesitated. Some of this is going to hurt. I've been hurt, Daisy said, her voice harder now. Show me anyway. Over the next hour, Henry laid out everything his investigators had found. Photos of Tom and Victoria Hastings at restaurants, hotels, her penthouse. Financial records showing Tom had embezzled from 3 clients to cover his gambling debts. Emails where he discussed divorcing Daisy before the accident. Cold and clinical, like she was a business problem to solve. But it was the timeline that made Daisy's blood run cold. Tom had consulted a lawyer about divorce 2 weeks before her accident. The same week, her grandfather's lawyers had started trying to reach them. He didn't know about the inheritance, Henry said, watching her face carefully. The lawyer confirmed that. But here's what doesn't make sense. He pulled up another document. This one, a police report. Your accident happened on Route 44, heading west. But you lived east of the hospital. You were going the opposite direction from home at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. Where were you going, Daisy? She closed her eyes, reaching for memories that felt like trying to grab smoke. I don't remember. The doctor said the trauma caused some memory loss from that week. The investigator I hired, Marcus Chen, he was following you that night. He said you looked upset, drove fast like you were running from something. His report says another vehicle, a black SUV, was also tailing you. When Marcus got close, the SUV swerved, tried to cut him off, and that's when you swerved to avoid them and hit the guardrail. Daisy's head snapped up. Someone else was following me? Who? We don't know. The SUV fled the scene. No plates, no identification. Police wrote it off as coincidence, but Marcus didn't think so. He thought someone wanted to scare you, or worse. A chill ran down Daisy's spine. You're saying my accident might not have been an accident at all? Henry's silence was answer enough. Before Daisy could process this, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk about your grandfather. About what he really did. You're in danger. Trust no one. She showed Henry, her hands trembling. His face went pale. That's not from me. I don't know who. Another text. Henry Valone isn't who he says he is. Ask him about Rowan Steele. Ask him why he really cares. Daisy looked up at Henry, searching his face. What is this? What does this mean? I don't know, he said, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. Guilt. Daisy, I told you everything. Did you? Her voice was sharp now, the nurse in her recognizing evasion. What's your connection to Rowan Steele? To my grandfather? Henry stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair. My family worked for your grandfather. My father was a foreman at the plant before it closed. A lot of people lost their jobs when Alistair sold the company, including my dad. He never recovered. Died broke and bitter 5 years ago. The air between them crackled with new tension. So you blame my grandfather? Blame me? No, Henry said firmly. My father made his own choices. But when I saw Tom was married to Alistair Rowan's granddaughter, when I saw what he was doing to you, maybe part of me thought... He stopped. Jaw clenched. Maybe I thought I could balance some cosmic scale. Save you the way no one saved my father. The honesty of it hit Daisy like a wave. He wasn't perfect. His motives weren't pure. But at least he was real. Before she could respond, Rose Lonergan appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. Miss O'Hara, we have a problem. Tom Butler has filed a motion to contest the divorce. He's claiming he was under duress, that he didn't understand you were incapacitated, and that he deserves a portion of your inheritance as your spouse during the time your grandfather died. Daisy felt the walls closing in. Tom wanted her money. Someone was sending threatening texts. Her accident might have been attempted murder. And the one person offering to help her had his own complicated reasons for being there. Sarah appeared behind Rose. Her face flushed. Daisy, there's a reporter downstairs asking about you and Tom and the inheritance. This is getting out of hand. Henry moved closer to the wheelchair, his presence solid and protective. Let me help you. I have lawyers, security, resources. You don't have to face this alone. Daisy looked up at him, at this complicated man with storm cloud eyes who'd crashed into her life as violently as that guardrail had. She thought about Tom, about 6 years of making herself smaller to fit into his world. She thought about the woman she'd been before, the nurse who'd worked double shifts and saved lives and hadn't needed anyone to complete her. And she thought about the woman she could become with $100 million and the freedom to choose her own path. Okay, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around her. But we do this my way. I'm not trading one man controlling my life for another. You want to help? Then help me get strong enough to fight my own battles. Something that looked like respect flashed across Henry's face. Deal. Outside, Tom Butler stood beside his car, watching Daisy's hospital window. He didn't see the black SUV parked 3 rows back, didn't notice the figure inside lifting a camera with a telephoto lens. The figure snapped photo after photo, then sent a text to an encrypted number. She's awake. Valone has made contact. Butler is getting desperate. What do you want me to do? The response came immediately. Watch and wait. The truth will destroy them all soon enough. Hey, I'm loving the tension building here. Drop a comment below and let me know whose side you're on right now. Team Henry or Team Nobody. And if you're enjoying this story, make sure you're subscribed, because the twists are just getting started. 3 days later, Daisy was standing on her own, gripping the parallel bars with white knuckles, but standing, when the memory hit her like lightning. She gasped, nearly falling, and Henry caught her arm. He'd been there every day since his confession, keeping his distance but staying close. A silent guardian she hadn't asked for, but had stopped questioning. What is it? His voice was urgent, concerned. I remember, Daisy breathed, her eyes wide. The night of the accident. I remember where I was going. She looked up at Henry, her heart pounding. I got a call. A woman. She said her name was Catherine Rowan. She said she was my grandfather's assistant. That he'd passed away and left me something important. Something I needed to see before the lawyers made it official. She told me to meet her at the Riverside Diner on Route 44 at 11:30. Henry's face went completely white. Catherine Rowan died 6 years ago. She was buried next to your grandfather. The room seemed to tilt. Sarah moved closer, ready to catch Daisy if she fell. But Daisy forced herself to stay upright. That's impossible. I spoke to her. She knew things. Specific things about my grandfather. About my mother. What things? Henry demanded, his grip on her arm tightening. She said my grandfather regretted the estrangement, that my mother had left because she'd discovered something about his business, something dangerous. She said he'd spent years trying to protect me from people who'd want to hurt me if they knew I was his heir. She said I needed to see proof before I accepted anything from his estate. Henry pulled out his phone with shaking hands, dialed a number. Marcus, I need you at Mercy General now. Daisy remembers. He hung up and turned to Rose Lonigan, who'd just arrived for their daily legal briefing. Tell her about the Rowan Steel sale. Everything. Rose's professional composure cracked. Henry, that's not... Tell her, he repeated, his voice like steel. Rose set down her briefcase, her expression grave. When your grandfather sold Rowan Steel 15 years ago, there was controversy. 3 executives claimed he'd stolen proprietary technology they'd developed, sold it as part of the company assets, and pocketed an extra $50 million. They sued. The case was settled out of court, sealed records, NDAs all around. Daisy's legs were trembling. What does this have to do with my accident? One of those executives, Rose continued, was named David Valone. The world stopped. Daisy looked at Henry, saw the agony in his face, and understood. Your father was one of the executives who sued my grandfather. Yes, Henry said, his voice rough. But he lost. They all did. Your grandfather had better lawyers, deeper pockets, and connections that buried the truth. My father didn't just lose his job. He lost his reputation, his savings fighting the lawsuit, and eventually his will to live. I told you he died broke and bitter. What I didn't tell you was that his last words were your grandfather's name. The betrayal felt like ice in Daisy's veins. So everything you've done, getting close to me, offering to help, it's all revenge. No. Henry moved in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. It started that way. When I saw Tom was married to Alistair Rowan's granddaughter, when I saw what he was planning, I thought maybe I'd expose him. Ruin your life the way your grandfather ruined my father's. Poetic justice, his voice cracked. But then I started learning about you. Not just from my investigators, but from hospital records, from people who knew you. The nursing supervisor at Boston General, who said you were the most compassionate nurse she'd ever supervised. The patients who wrote letters about you. The way you gave up your career for a man who didn't deserve you. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not touching. And then I met you. Saw you fighting to walk again, fighting to rebuild after he destroyed you. And I realized you're nothing like your grandfather. You're everything he should have been. Daisy's eyes burned. How do I know this isn't manipulation? How do I know you're telling the truth now? You don't, Henry said simply. But I'm done lying. My investigator, Marcus Chen, has been on my payroll for 3 years, specifically to watch anything related to Rowan assets. When your grandfather died, Marcus flagged it. I knew about your inheritance before the lawyers went public. I knew Tom would destroy you if he found out, so I had Marcus watch, gather evidence. But I swear to you, Daisy, I never wanted you hurt. The accident was never part of any plan. The door opened, and a thin Asian man in his 40s entered, carrying a tablet. Marcus Chen. He nodded to Henry, then looked at Daisy with something like remorse. Ms. O'Hara, the night of your accident, I followed you to Route 44, but you weren't alone. A black SUV was already on your tail before you left the hospital parking lot. Professional tail knew how to stay hidden. When you pulled into the Riverside Diner, there was no one there. You waited 20 minutes, then got back on the road. That's when the SUV made its move. He pulled up footage on his tablet. Grainy dashcam video showing Daisy's car swerving as the black SUV clipped her rear bumper, sending her spinning into the guardrail. This wasn't an accident, Miss O'Hara. Someone tried to kill you. And whoever called you pretending to be Catherine Rowan lured you there. Daisy couldn't breathe. Someone had tried to murder her. The same night her husband was planning to divorce her. The same night she should have learned about her inheritance. Who? Her voice was barely a whisper. Who wants me dead? Marcus and Henry exchanged a look. We've been investigating that for 6 months, Marcus said. The SUV was registered to a shell corporation, untraceable. But here's what we know. Someone didn't want you to claim that inheritance. Someone with resources and connections. Rose stepped forward, her face pale. There's something else. I didn't think it mattered until now, but your grandfather's will had a contingency clause. If you died before claiming the inheritance, it would be divided among 3 charitable foundations. I have the names here. She pulled out a document, and Henry leaned over her shoulder to read. His face went dark as thunder. Victoria Hastings, her father, Richard Hastings, sits on the board of all 3 foundations. If Daisy had died in that coma, the Hastings family would have controlled the entire $100 million distribution. Daisy felt the floor drop out from under her. Victoria, Tom's new fiancée, the woman he planned to marry while Daisy was unconscious. Tom, she whispered. Did Tom know? Was he part of this? Henry's jaw clenched. We're about to find out, He pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, it buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but this time there was an attachment. A video file. Henry opened it, and Daisy watched over his shoulder as the footage played. It was Tom, 6 months ago, sitting in a restaurant across from a silver-haired man Daisy didn't recognize. The audio was muffled, but clear enough. "If she doesn't wake up, you get the girl and the money," the man said. Tom's voice, cold and calculated. "And if she does wake up, then we have a problem. But comas like that, 6 months deep. Most people don't come back, and if they do, they're vegetables. Either way, she won't be your problem anymore." Tom raised his glass to new beginnings. The video ended. Daisy stood there, every muscle in her body shaking, but not from weakness. From rage. Her husband hadn't just abandoned her. He'd hoped she would die, and the woman he'd chosen to replace her might have tried to make that happen. The video went viral within hours. Someone leaked it to every major news outlet, and by morning, Daisy's face was everywhere. "Coma Iris, target of murder plot," screamed the headlines. Tom Butler's carefully constructed image shattered overnight. His real estate firm imploded, and Victoria Hastings disappeared from her penthouse without a trace. But Daisy didn't feel victorious. She felt hunted. Rose arrived at the hospital at dawn, her usual composure completely gone. "We have a serious problem. Tom's lawyers are claiming the video is fabricated, that someone is trying to frame him. They're filing defamation suits against everyone who published it, and they are demanding an investigation into who's been illegally surveilling their client." She paused, her eyes finding Henry. "They're specifically naming you, Mr. Vallone. They're saying you've been orchestrating a harassment campaign against Tom Butler because of your father's grudge against the Rowan family. They're painting you as the villain." Henry's face was stone. "Let them. The video is real." "Can you prove it?" Rose demanded. "Can you prove chain of custody? That it hasn't been doctored? That you obtained it legally?" The silence that followed was damning. Marcus Chen stepped forward. "The video was sent anonymously. We have no idea who recorded it or how. It could have been someone at the restaurant, another investigator, or—" He stopped, his expression troubled. "Or it could be someone setting us up. Someone who wants us to look like we're fabricating evidence." Daisy's stomach turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Marcus continued carefully, "that in 6 months of investigating Tom Butler, we never found anything this incriminating. It's too perfect, too damning. Someone wanted us to have this." Henry turned to him sharply. "You think it's a trap?" "I think," Marcus said, "that we're being manipulated, all of us. And I think whoever sent that video wants the heat on Tom and Henry, which means they're trying to stay hidden." Before anyone could respond, Detective Ray Sinclair walked into the room, his badge visible on his belt. 2 uniformed officers flanked him. "Henry Vallone, I need you to come with us for questioning regarding illegal surveillance and stalking charges filed by Thomas Butler." Henry didn't move. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," Sinclair said. "We've also got questions about your connection to Miss O'Hara's accident. Witness statements say you've been pressuring her, isolating her from family and friends." "I don't have family," Daisy said sharply, "and he hasn't pressured me." Sinclair's eyes shifted to her, and she saw pity there. "Ms. O'Hara, we've been looking into Mr. Vallone's background. Did you know his father blamed your grandfather for his death? Did you know Henry hired investigators to track your every move for 3 years before your accident?" 3 years. The words hit like a physical blow. Daisy looked at Henry, saw the guilt flash across his face, and felt something inside her crack. 3 years. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You've been watching me for 3 years. Daisy, let me explain." Henry started, but Sinclair cut him off. "You can explain at the station. Let's go." They took him in handcuffs. Henry locked eyes with Daisy as they led him past, and she saw desperation there, saw him trying to communicate something, but she couldn't process it. 3 years. He'd been watching her for 3 years. Her entire marriage to Tom had been under surveillance by a man whose father had died hating her grandfather. Rose waited until the police left, then turned to Daisy with grave eyes. "There's more. The Hastings family has filed an injunction against you accessing any of your inheritance until the investigation into the video is complete. They're claiming you and Henry conspired to frame Tom, that the whole thing is a scheme to steal money that should have gone to charity." Daisy felt the walls closing in. "They can't do that. The money is mine." "They're arguing that your grandfather's will was made under suspicious circumstances, that he was mentally incompetent when he wrote it, and that his estrangement from your mother suggests he wouldn't have left you anything if he'd been in his right mind. It's a long shot. But with all the publicity, with Henry being arrested, with the questions about the video, a judge might freeze the assets pending investigation." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face stricken. "Daisy, there are reporters everywhere. They're camped outside, trying to get in. Security is overwhelmed. And," she hesitated, "your discharge papers came through. Insurance won't cover any more days. You have to leave by tonight." "Leave to where?" Daisy demanded. "I don't have a home. Tom got the house in the divorce. I don't have access to my inheritance. I can barely walk without assistance." The panic was rising now, threatening to drown her. Everything was falling apart. Tom was claiming victimhood. Henry was in custody, revealed to have been stalking her for years. Victoria had vanished. The money she'd just learned existed was frozen. And someone out there had tried to kill her once already. Rose's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. "They found Victoria Hastings. She's dead. Apparent suicide in a hotel room in Providence. She left a note confessing to orchestrating the attempt on your life, claiming she acted alone, that Tom knew nothing." The room spun. Daisy gripped the edge of the bed, her legs threatening to give out. "That's convenient." Too convenient. "The police don't think so," Rose said quietly. "They're calling it a closed case." Victoria confessed, killed herself out of guilt. Tom is being painted as another victim, and Henry's arrest makes it look like he was trying to frame an innocent man. Marcus Chen's face was dark with frustration. "This is a setup. Someone is tying up loose ends. Victoria probably knew too much, and now she's dead and can't contradict whatever story they're selling. But who?" Daisy's voice broke. "Who has the power to do all this?" The answer came from the doorway. Tom Butler stood there, flanked by lawyers, looking devastated and perfectly sympathetic in a rumpled suit designed to make him look like he'd been suffering. "Daisy, sweetheart, I know you've been manipulated by Henry Vallone. I know he's filled your head with lies about me. But I've always loved you. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never wanted you hurt. Please, let me help you. Come home with me. Let me take care of you while we sort this out." Behind him, cameras flashed. This was a performance, Daisy realized. He was rehabilitating his image in real time, playing the devoted husband trying to save his troubled wife from a stalker's influence. If she refused, she'd look unstable, paranoid. If she accepted, she'd be walking back into the hands of a man who might have wanted her dead. She had no money, no home, no one she could trust. Henry was in custody, possibly having used her for his own revenge. Victoria was dead. The truth was buried under layers of lies and legal maneuvers. and Tom stood there with his hand extended, cameras rolling, waiting for her answer. For the first time since waking up, Daisy felt truly, completely alone. Daisy looked at Tom's extended hand, at the cameras flashing behind him, at the perfectly calculated expression of concern on his face. She looked at Rose, at Sarah, at Marcus Chen standing helplessly against the wall. And then she looked at herself in the reflection of the window. A woman in a hospital gown who'd spent 6 months unconscious while the world moved on without her. The old Daisy would have taken his hand, would have doubted herself, questioned her judgment, chosen peace over truth. The old Daisy had made herself small for 6 years to fit into Tom Butler's perfectly curated life. But that Daisy had died on Route 44 6 months ago. The woman who'd woken up was someone different. Someone forged in pain and betrayal and the slow, agonizing work of learning to walk again. "No," Daisy said, her voice steady and clear. Tom's smile faltered. "Sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly. You've been through trauma." I said no. Daisy stood up from the bed, her legs shaking but holding. Sarah moved to support her, but Daisy waved her off. She needed to do this on her own. "You filed for a divorce while I was in a coma. You gave up on me when I needed you most. And now that I'm worth $100 million, suddenly you remember you love me." The reporters behind Tom were recording every word. "Good. Let them." "That video was fabricated," Tom said, his voice hardening. "Henry Vallone has been stalking you, obsessed with destroying me because of some grudge about his father." "Maybe," Daisy interrupted. "Maybe Henry's motives weren't pure at the start. Maybe he did watch me because of his father's history with my grandfather. But here's what I know. Henry told me the truth. He confessed everything, even the parts that made him look bad. You've never told me the truth about anything." She took a step forward, and Tom actually stepped back. "You want to help me, Tom? Then tell me the truth right now, on camera. Did you know about Victoria's plan? Did you know someone was following me the night of my accident?" Tom's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain the man in that video. The one who said if I didn't wake up, you'd get the girl and the money. Who was he?" "I told you. That video was—" "His name is Richard Hastings," Marcus Chen interrupted, stepping forward with his tablet. "Victoria's father. I've been digging since this morning. Richard Hastings serves on the board of all 3 charities that would have received Daisy's inheritance if she died. He also owns a security company that specializes in, quote, discreet problem solving. And his company purchased a black SUV 6 weeks before Daisy's accident. An SUV that was reported stolen the night after her crash." The room went silent. Tom's lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but Tom shook him off. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually," said a new voice from the doorway, "we can." Henry Vallone stood there, no longer in handcuffs, with Detective Sinclair beside him. Henry's face was bruised, his shirt wrinkled, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on Daisy. "Charges were dropped," Sinclair said gruffly. "New evidence came to light. Mr. Vallone has been cooperating with our investigation." Henry crossed the room to Daisy, and she saw everything in his face. Exhaustion, regret, determination, and something deeper that made her heart stutter. "Victoria Hastings didn't kill herself," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Daisy's. "The medical examiner found defensive wounds. Someone staged it. And before she died, she sent an email to her personal account, time to release if she didn't cancel it every 24 hours. A dead man's switch." He pulled out his phone, showing Daisy the screen. "This came through an hour ago." Daisy read Victoria's words, her hands trembling. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. My father, Richard Hastings, orchestrated everything. He found out about Daisy O'Hara's inheritance through his charity connections. He told Tom about it, promised to split it if Tom could marry me, and ensure Daisy never woke up. I didn't know about the accident. I swear I didn't know he'd try to kill her. But when she survived, when she woke up, my father said we had to finish it. I couldn't. I told him I was done, and now I'm afraid he's going to kill me too. I'm so sorry. I was weak and greedy, and I helped destroy an innocent woman's life. If I'm dead, it's because I tried to do the right thing too late. The reporters were recording everything, their cameras swiveling between Daisy, Tom, and the phone screen Henry held up. Tom's face had gone from pale to gray. I didn't know, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I didn't know about the murder attempt. Richard just said he could help me financially if I married Victoria. If I was free. You hoped I'd die, Daisy said, and her voice didn't waver. Maybe you didn't pull the trigger, Tom, but you hoped the coma would kill me. You said vows to me, in sickness and in health. And when I got sick, you planned your next wedding. Tom's lawyer was pulling him toward the door now, muttering about not saying anything else, about damage control. Tom looked back at Daisy one last time, and she saw the truth in his eyes. He'd never loved her. Maybe he'd loved the idea of her, the devoted wife who made him look good. But he'd never seen her as a person, as someone with value beyond what she could give him. You'll regret this, Tom said, as his lawyer dragged him away. That money should be mine. And there it was, the truth he couldn't help but reveal. Henry moved closer to Daisy, and she could feel the warmth of him, the solid presence that had become familiar over the past few days. I'm sorry, he said quietly, just for her. For watching you. For having ulterior motives. For everything my investigation put in motion. But I'm not sorry for meeting you. I'm not sorry for seeing who you really are. Daisy looked up at him, this complicated man with his own scars and guilt. 3 years is a long time to carry a grudge. It wasn't a grudge by the end, Henry admitted. The first year, maybe, but then it became something else. Watching you give everything to a man who gave nothing back, I wanted to shake you awake. And when I couldn't, when you were actually unconscious and he was still taking from you, I realized I wasn't watching anymore because of my father. I was watching because He stopped, jaw clenched. Because you what? Daisy prompted, her heart racing. Because I fell in love with a woman I'd never actually met, Henry said. And I know how that sounds. I know it's not rational or healthy or probably even real. But when you opened your eyes in the hospital bed, when you looked at me like I was someone worth trusting despite everything, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that look. Detective Sinclair cleared his throat. This is very touching, but we have a billionaire to arrest. Richard Hastings fled this morning when Victoria's email went public. We've got an APB out, but he has resources and a head start. Henry turned to him. He'll run to the estate in Connecticut. Rowan Estate. It's remote, defensible, and he probably thinks Daisy doesn't even know it exists yet. Daisy's head snapped up. My grandfather's estate. Your estate now, Rose corrected, having been quietly watching the entire scene. You inherited all properties, including the main house in Hartford County. 40 acres, fully staffed, and legally yours. For the first time in days, Daisy felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but something stronger, purpose. Then let's go get him, she said. Let's end this. Sarah started to protest about her medical discharge, but Daisy cut her off with a look. I've been lying down for 6 months. I'm done being a victim in my own story. She held out her hand to Henry, and after a heartbeat of hesitation, he took it. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and strong and steady. "Together," he asked. "Together," Daisy agreed. And for the first time since waking up, she felt like herself again. The Rowan estate rose from the Connecticut hillside like something out of a Gothic novel, all stone and iron gates, and windows that watched like eyes. Daisy pressed her face to the car window as Henry drove through the entrance. Police cars following at a discreet distance per Detective Sinclair's strategy. "He doesn't know we're coming," Sinclair had said. "We need to catch him off guard. Get him to confess on record." But as they approached the main house, Daisy saw movement in the upper windows. "He knows," she said quietly. Henry's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then we adapt." They parked in the circular drive, and Daisy stepped out onto the gravel, her legs still weak but holding. She'd refused the wheelchair, had refused anything that would make her look vulnerable. The front door opened before they reached it, and Richard Hastings stood there in an expensive cardigan, holding a glass of scotch like he was greeting weekend guests. He was tall, silver-haired, distinguished in that old money way that made cruelty look like class. "Miss O'Hara," he said pleasantly, "welcome to your inheritance. I've been keeping it warm for you." Daisy stopped 10 feet away, Henry beside her, Marcus and Detective Sinclair flanking them. "You tried to kill me. You killed your own daughter." Richard's smile didn't waver. Victoria was weak. "She couldn't finish what we started. As for you, my dear, you were supposed to be a simple problem with a simple solution. A tragic accident, a grieving husband, and a fortune redirected to worthy causes, but you had to wake up." "Why?" Daisy demanded. "The charities would have gotten the money anyway." "Why did you need me dead?" "Because," Richard said, taking a sip of scotch, "your grandfather and I had an arrangement. 20 years ago, when he sold Rowan Steel, he promised me a percentage of his estate in exchange for my silence about certain irregularities in the sale. He broke that promise, left everything to you instead. I simply decided to correct his error." Henry stepped forward. "My father was right. Alistair Rowan did steal that technology. You helped him do it. Your father was a brilliant engineer and a terrible businessman," Richard said dismissively. "He invented the thermal composite that made Rowan Steel worth billions, but he didn't have the vision to monetize it. Alistair did. I helped facilitate the patents, and I was promised 20%. Instead, I got a pittance and a non-disclosure agreement." Sinclair was recording everything, but he stayed quiet, letting Richard talk. Daisy felt puzzle pieces clicking into place. "My mother found out. That's why she left. She discovered you and my grandfather stole from his employees." Richard's expression darkened. "Your mother was self-righteous and naive. She threatened to go public, to destroy everything her father built. Alistair chose his empire over his daughter, and he spent the rest of his life regretting it, apparently, because he left everything to you. His attempt at redemption. So you decided to kill me before I could claim it," Daisy said, her voice hard. "You manipulated Tom, used your daughter, and when Victoria grew a conscience, you murdered her too." "I did what was necessary," Richard said calmly, "and you can't prove otherwise. Victoria's email is the rambling of a mentally unstable woman. The video of Tom is inadmissible. You have nothing but speculation and the word of a man who's been stalking you for years." He gestured to Henry with his scotch glass. "The courts will tie this up for decades. And in the meantime, the estate sits frozen while I maintain it as trustee. I may not get everything, but I'll get enough." Daisy felt rage boiling in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She thought about 6 months in a coma, about waking up to find her husband gone, about learning to walk again while the man responsible drank scotch in her grandfather's house. Then she remembered something Rose had mentioned days ago. The estate was fully staffed. "Mrs. Chen," Daisy called out, her voice ringing across the driveway. An elderly woman appeared in the doorway behind Richard, wearing a housekeeper's uniform. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mrs. Chen, you were my grandfather's housekeeper for 30 years, correct?" The woman nodded, looking nervously at Richard. "Don't answer that," Richard snapped. "I was also his friend," Mrs. Chen said quietly, her accent thick but her words clear. "And I was here the night he died." "I heard him talking to you, Mr. Hastings. He told you the money was going to his granddaughter, that he wanted to make things right with his family. You told him he'd regret it." Richard's face went pale. "That's a lie. You brought him his medication," Mrs. Chen continued, tears streaming down her face. "But I saw you switch the bottles. I saw you give him the wrong pills. I was too afraid to say anything before, afraid you'd hurt me too. But when I heard about Victoria, when I heard what you did to this poor girl, I knew I had to tell the truth." She looked at Daisy with desperate eyes. "Your grandfather loved you. He talked about you all the time, regretted every day he lost with you. He died, trying to make it right, and this man murdered him for it." Detective Sinclair moved forward, his hand on his weapon. "Richard Hastings, you're under arrest for the murders of Alistair Rowan and Victoria Hastings, and the attempted murder of Daisy O'Hara." Richard threw the scotch glass, and it shattered against the gravel. "You have no proof. It's her word against mine. She's a housekeeper, an immigrant. No one will believe." "I have proof," said another voice. Marcus Chen stepped forward, holding up his tablet. "Mrs. Chen is my mother. She called me 3 days ago, told me everything. I've been collecting evidence since then. Security footage from the estate showing you entering Alistair's room the night he died. Financial records showing you purchased the same medication, the wrong dosage. Phone records showing you called the man who drove the SUV that hit Daisy. And," he pulled up another file, "a recording of you and Victoria arguing the night before she died, where you explicitly threatened to make it look like suicide if she didn't keep quiet." Richard lunged, but Henry was faster. He caught Richard's arm, twisted it behind his back, and held him until Sinclair could cuff him. "That's for my father," Henry said quietly, "and for every person you destroyed because you thought money made you untouchable." As police led Richard away, still protesting his innocence, Daisy felt her legs finally give out. Henry caught her, lowered her gently to sit on the stone steps of her grandfather's house. Her house now. Mrs. Chen brought her water, apologizing over and over for not speaking sooner. Daisy took the woman's weathered hand and squeezed. "You spoke when it mattered. That's what counts." She looked up at the estate, at this massive inheritance built on theft and secrets, and her grandfather's final attempt at redemption. She thought about her mother, who'd chosen principle over wealth, about her grandfather, who'd learned too late that money couldn't buy back love. And she thought about the woman she wanted to be, not the devoted wife who made herself small, not the victim who let others write her story. Someone new, someone who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger. Henry sat beside her on the steps, close but not touching, waiting. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "About falling in love with you. I know it's complicated. I know I don't deserve—" Daisy kissed him, just leaned over and pressed her lips to his, tasting surprise and hope and the beginning of something that felt nothing like what she'd had with Tom. This felt real. When she pulled back, Henry's eyes were wide. "I don't know if this is love yet," Daisy said honestly, "but I know you see me. The real me. And that's something I've never had before." Henry smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Then let's find out together. No more watching from a distance. No more secrets. No more secrets, Daisy agreed. Behind him, Mrs. Chen was crying happy tears. Detective Sinclair was coordinating the arrest. Marcus was already on his phone, probably updating Rose, and Daisy sat on the steps of her inheritance, holding hands with a man who'd started as her enemy and become something infinitely more complicated, and felt the first real stirring of peace. Justice had been served. The truth had won, and she was finally, truly free. Months after Richard Hastings was sentenced to life in prison for 3 murders and 1 attempted murder, Daisy stood in the grand ballroom of the Rowan estate, surrounded by 200 women whose stories echoed her own. The Phoenix Foundation's inaugural gala was everything she'd envisioned when she'd first conceived the idea in her hospital bed. Women who'd been abandoned during illness, who'd lost everything to divorce while they were vulnerable, who'd been betrayed by the people who'd promised to protect them. They wore evening gowns, donated by local designers, their faces glowing with something Daisy recognized immediately. Hope. Sarah stood near the stage, laughing with a group of physical therapists the foundation had hired to provide free rehabilitation services. Mrs. Chen, now officially the estate manager and Daisy's surrogate grandmother, was directing catering staff with the efficiency of a general. Marcus Chen had become the foundation's head of security, ensuring that every woman who came through their doors was protected from the people who'd harmed them. And Rose Lonigan, no longer just a lawyer but a friend, was schmoozing with donors who'd lined up to support what the media had dubbed the most inspiring charity origin story in decades. Tom Butler's trial had been swift and brutal. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder. He'd taken a plea deal and was serving 15 years in a minimum security facility, his real estate empire liquidated to pay back his victims. Daisy had watched the sentencing via video feed, felt nothing but a distant pity for the man who'd thrown away something real in pursuit of something shinier. Victoria Hastings had been buried beside her mother, and Daisy had attended the funeral, placing white lilies on the grave of a woman who'd been both villain and victim. The investigation had revealed that Victoria had tried to back out 3 times, that her father had controlled her through fear and manipulation her entire life. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped Daisy understand. Forgiveness was a process, her therapist had told her. Some days were easier than others. Henry found her on the terrace overlooking the gardens, the ones Mrs. Chen had restored to match photos from when Daisy's mother was young. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, but it was the softness in his eyes when he looked at her that made Daisy's breath catch. "You're hiding," he said, handing her a glass of champagne. "I'm observing," Daisy corrected, accepting the glass. "There's a difference. The woman who's supposed to give the keynote speech in 10 minutes is observing from the terrace." Henry raised an eyebrow. "That's called hiding, counselor." She'd started calling him that after he'd enrolled in law school, determined to fight for people the way he wished someone had fought for his father. He'd graduate next spring, and the foundation had already offered him a position as their legal advocate. Daisy smiled despite her nerves. What if I mess it up? What if I say the wrong thing? Henry set down his glass and took her hands. The gesture so familiar now, it felt like coming home. "Then you'll be human. These women aren't here because you're perfect, Daisy. They're here because you survived, because you took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that helps people. That's not perfection. That's courage." 6 months together, and he still knew exactly what to say. They'd taken it slow, seeing a couple's therapist to work through the complicated foundation of their relationship, the watching, and the secrets and the guilt. But underneath all that complexity was something simple and true. They saw each other. The broken parts, and the healing parts, and the parts still figuring themselves out. "I love you," Daisy said, the words still new enough to taste like joy. even though you're bossy and overprotective and you still feel guilty about things that weren't your fault. Henry grinned. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and you refuse to use the wheelchair when you're tired, and you cry at every single intake interview, even though I keep telling you it's okay to maintain professional distance. They're tears of empathy, Daisy protested. That's different. They're tears because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. Henry corrected, pulling her close. And it's one of the 1,000 reasons I'm going to marry you someday. When you're ready, no pressure. Daisy's heart skipped. They talked about marriage in abstract terms. Someday, and maybe, and when the time is right. But hearing him say it so plainly, so certainly, made it feel real. Someday soon, she promised, stretching up to kiss him. But first, I have a speech to give. The ballroom erupted in applause when she walked to the podium. Henry standing in the front row beside Mrs. Chen and Sarah and Marcus. Rose gave her an encouraging thumbs up. Daisy looked out at 200 faces, 200 stories of betrayal and survival, and felt the last piece of her old self fall away. My name is Daisy O'Hara, she began, her voice steady and strong. And a year ago, my husband divorced me while I was in a coma. The room went silent, every eye on her. I woke up to find everything I thought I knew was a lie. My marriage was over. My home was gone. Someone had tried to kill me, and I had inherited a fortune from a grandfather I'd never known, built on secrets and stolen dreams. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I could have used that money to disappear, to hide from everything that had happened. I could have spent it on revenge, making sure everyone who hurt me suffered. But instead, I decided to build something, because the worst thing that ever happened to me taught me the most important lesson of my life. Daisy's eyes found Henry's, and she smiled. You can't control what people do to you. You can't prevent betrayal or tragedy or loss. But you can control what you build from the ashes. You can choose to let pain make you bitter, or you can let it make you brave. And I chose brave. The applause started small, then built like a wave, 200 women standing, tears streaming down faces that had seen too much darkness and were finally finding light. After the gala, after the last donor had left, and the caterers had packed up and Mrs. Chen had shooed them out of the ballroom, Daisy and Henry walked through the gardens under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Do you ever think about her? Daisy asked. Your Caroline? Wonder what she'd think of all this. Henry was quiet for a moment, considering. Every day, I think she'd be proud. I think she'd tell me I finally stopped living in the past and started building a future. He stopped walking, turned to face Daisy fully. She'd love you. Everyone who meets you loves you. Not everyone, Daisy said wryly, thinking of Tom and Richard and the tabloids that still occasionally ran hit pieces about the Coma heiress. Everyone who matters, Henry corrected. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Daisy's heart stopped. I know I said someday. I know we agreed to take it slow. But standing here, watching you give that speech, seeing you turn your pain into purpose, I realized I don't want to wait for someday. I want to start our life now. He's opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the moonlight. Daisy O'Hara, will you marry me? Not because of money or obligation or anything except the fact that you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. Daisy was crying, happy tears that tasted like healing and hope and new beginnings. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Henry slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They kissed under the stars in the garden her mother had played in as a child, in the estate built on complicated legacies and second chances. and Daisy felt complete. She'd lost everything and found herself. She'd been broken and rebuilt stronger. She'd learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about someone staying when things got hard, someone seeing your worst and choosing you anyway, someone building a future with you, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. "So," Henry said, when they finally pulled apart, "what do you want to do first? Big wedding or small? Traditional or unconventional?" Daisy laughed, the sound bright and free. "I want to marry you in the hospital chapel where I woke up. I want Sarah to be my maid of honor and Mrs. Chen to give me away. I want it small and real and nothing like what I had before." "Perfect," Henry said, kissing her forehead. "Absolutely perfect." And it was. 3 months later, they married in that chapel with 20 people who actually mattered, and Daisy wore a simple dress and walked down the aisle on legs that had learned to be strong again. The Phoenix Foundation flourished, helping thousands of women rebuild their lives. Mrs. Chen became the grandmother Daisy had never had. Marcus and Sarah started dating, bonding over their shared love of protecting Daisy. And every morning, Daisy woke up next to a man who loved her, not for what she could give him, but for who she was. She'd inherited $100 million, but the real fortune was the life she'd built from the ruins. A life of purpose and love and second chances. A life that was finally, completely her own. Before I let you go, I want to hear from you. What part of Daisy's journey resonated with you most? Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a new beginning. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, stories about courage and redemption and love that heals, are what we're all about here. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than whatever tried to break you.